I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. I'm going to do this just a heads up. The way this is going to be structured is we're first going to talk a little bit about your magazines and why I am so passionate about what you guys do, and why I see it as such a huge piece of the puzzle in terms of actually making our communities better and by helping small businesses. I mean, we're in an age, as AI continues to develop and take form, and its impact on the world continues to shape. Um, the ability of people to create their own business is going to be essential because more and more of the corporate environment is going to be AI driven. And so people who are able to build something locally in their community are going to be the ones that push our communities forward. And so you guys are uniquely in a situation where you're building something positive in the community while also helping all these individual small business owners build something positive in the community as well. And that's incredibly powerful. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how, when you go into a sales presentation, you have to set yourself up for the close in order for the close to be effective. Most people don't do that. They're not in a good position when they start trying to close the deal, to make a sale. And so nothing they do in the close is actually going to complete the process. And then finally at the end, we're going to take a little break in there, see if anybody has any questions about that points. And then we're going to get into the 5 mistakes. And do not be surprised if you find that you're making all 5 of them. And it's not a reflection on you as a publisher, but it's a reflection of just human nature. And just know that this is not a magazine issue, that the 5 points that I present as the mistakes you're making are the same 5 mistakes that every struggling salesperson out there is making, regardless of what their product is. Now, obviously, there's some nuances that are specific to what you're doing, but they are 5 mistakes that deal with you preventing the customer from saying yes easily. One of the things I'll mention real quickly, it's not what this course is. Maybe you've seen some promotions for some other webinars I've been doing. I've also been focusing on really trying to understand what that barrier is. I mean, one of the great things you guys have in the magazine world is you all have roadmaps to success. I mean, you literally have, if you do this and do it consistently and do it regularly, you will grow your business. You have no idea what a luxury that is in the business world, because all of the customers you're meeting with don't have that. When the guy out there that's a plumber that decides he wants to open his own plumbing business, he has no roadmap to success. He doesn't. I mean, you guys know you pick up the phone more often, you're going to do more appointments. You do more appointments, you're going to make more sales. You get better at your presentation, you're going to make sense. You have that roadmap. He has not, he doesn't have that. So what I've been looking at is when you have the roadmap, what stops you from moving forward? And I've created a concept and a framework for understanding that. And as we get into these 5 mistakes that people make, understand that most of them have to do with the struggles going on in the customer's mind that you're often not thinking about. What is really stopping them from moving forward? And when you're able to bypass those barriers that stop them from moving forward, then you're able to do things. Because ironically, the very force that often stops us from picking up the phone and calling potential customers is the same force that stops them from saying yes. And learning how to navigate that is essential to being a top level sales performer. Okay, first thing I want to mention once again, I've already talked about this. It is essential that you guys understand that you have the best tool for helping small businesses. I know when you're out there, it's incredibly easy when you're getting objection of objection, hearing print is dead, you're hearing it's too expensive, you're hearing all of these things. It is incredibly easy for you to start to believe some of that stuff. And if you start to believe some of that stuff, you're already working at a disadvantage. So, the first thing I want to establish before we get into the mistakes you're making in your close, I want to establish an absolute belief that you understand that you have not a good tool for helping these businesses, you have the best tool. Now, those of you who've been around me for a while know I can actually talk for a full hour on just why you have the best tool. But I'm going to collapse it down into some very simple points here to help you realize why what you do matters to this business and why no one else can offer them the same type of service that you do. The first thing I want to mention very quickly is understanding that high end homeowners generate more profit. The biggest struggle that businesses in your communities have is not always getting more customers. The biggest struggle they have is that most of the customers they get aren't profitable. Let me repeat that. They don't struggle getting customers, they struggle getting profitable customers. Almost every business is subject to the Pareto principle. 80% of their profit comes from just 20% of their customers. The thing about advertising in general, collectively, is most advertising focuses on reaching everyone equally, which means you're focusing as much on those 80% of the customers that don't produce profit as you are the 20% that do. Or worse yet, they focus on reaching only the 80% that don't generate profit. When you focus on discounts and sales and coupons, you are exclusively targeting that percentage of the customers that don't make you money. There are almost as many businesses that fail because they've got too many bad customers than that fail because they don't have enough customers. So you need to understand that, and that's one of the elements that separates your tool from other tools. The second thing that comes in play, because these high-end homeowners that are profitable, they don't make their decisions based on price. And that's one of the key elements to explain why they're more profitable. They make it on value and perceived quality. How do they make those decisions? By emotional connections. And your magazine creates emotional connections within a community like no other media can. And so, like I said, I could expand on these things for hours, but the key here is you need to understand the power of what you bring to the table. Because what you bring to the table is more powerful than what your competitors are bringing to the table. And understanding that will put you in a much better position to close the deal because that passion will shine through and that belief will shine through. Now, next thing I want to mention here is the sad part is that even though you have the best tool, it is also a very hard tool to sell. So don't beat yourself up if you struggle closing deals because you are up against some barriers and some obstacles that other salespeople don't face. And that is nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, it is something to be proud of. And I want you to think about this for just a second. Does the guy who works at the Rolls-Royce dealership, does he ever lament the fact that his cars are much more expensive than Kia's? No. Does he have a harder sale to make than the guy working at the Kia? Obviously. But yet he takes great pride in what he sells. And the fact that it's harder to sell becomes a challenge that he embraces rather than an obstacle he laments. And that is essential to this. So, why is your magazine harder than the guy selling the coupon clipper or the guy selling the sign on the side of a park bench? And there's several reasons for it. First is your product requires an understanding of advertising and marketing and business that few potential customers possess. The reality is 9 out of every 10 customers you sit down in front of are very, very, very good at what they do. They have very good products, but they have no clue how to run a business providing that service and selling that product. So you have an educational component that you're responsible for that others don't. And specifically, what I'm referencing here is that your competition focuses on more is better. If you can spend your $1,000 and reach 40,000 people, that is better than spending your $1,000 to reach 20,000 people. Almost all advertising is sold that way. And to the business that doesn't understand advertising, marketing, and business, they also don't understand targeting. And so it makes perfect logical sense that if I have $1,000 and I have the choice to reach 100,000 people, 20,000 people, or 8,000 people, I should spend it with the folks that reach 100,000. That's perfectly logical, and it is absolute and total horseshit. Because that 100,000 people doesn't mean anything if 97,000 of them are not potential customers or are customers that are going to cost you more money than you make. Your product is different. Your product is different. It focuses on just the ones who you need to reach in a way that they use to make decisions. And because of this difference, slow developing sales processes do not work. And this is one of the biggest struggles magazine publishers have in this landscape is perhaps in their previous sales jobs, they sold based on building these long-term, slow-growing relationships. That doesn't work in this magazine world because what happens is the longer things take, the more people forget about the things you taught them about targeted marketing and what your magazine does. And it's just as simple as that. Sales comes down to one simple equation. Does the customer feel like they are getting more value than they are paying for? If they feel like they're getting $5,000 worth of value and you're charging $1,000, they buy. And in order for them to understand the value of what you bring to the table, they have to understand your product and what it does differently and what it does better than the other options. When you're selling radio, or when you're selling TV, or when you're selling coupon clippers, you are selling them based on a cost per thousand basis. How much does it cost me to reach 1,000 people? That doesn't change. As a business owner, if I make that decision today, tomorrow, or 6 months from now, I have all the information I need to make the purchase, how much it's going to cost me per thousand. So my perception of the value doesn't change. With your product and your magazine, the more I forget about what you do and how what you do is better than what they do, the less value I see in the product. And so you end up, the value declines, the price stays the same, and eventually the value of what they think they're getting versus what they're paying isn't in your favor. And so that's why the slow processes don't work. And that is why being able to close that sale immediately or within a very short window after doing the presentation is essential. And that's why we're talking about what we're talking about today. Now, moving from there, before we get to the 5 mistakes, I want to talk about how essential it is to set up the close properly. Because if you haven't made the table, if you don't have all the plates in their right place and the forks there and the glasses and the salt and pepper shaker, the food isn't going to be served properly. So you have to think about that in terms of setting up the close. And some things you have to do to set up the close are very simple. First of all, you got to make sure you're talking to a decision maker. If you do 1,000 presentations with business owners and all 1,000 presentations have meetings with the janitor, you're not going to close any deals. Nothing else matters. So understand that. You have to make sure you are talking to a person who either is the decision maker or, for larger organizations, is a essential cog in the decision-making process. If they are not, you can't make the sale. There's nothing you can do. Don't judge yourself on it because you're just practicing. And understand that. And a simple way of establishing that is to simply say at the very beginning, just say, hey, I think I can really help you with some of your struggles with marketing. I think I've got the perfect product. In fact, I think I've got the best product for helping you do that. If we decide today that this is the miracle pill you've been looking for, are you in a position to move forward? And that will tell you that whether they are a decision maker or not. Now, understand that they may say yes, and then at the end say they need to talk to somebody else. That still happens. And if that happens, it doesn't mean they lied to you. What it means is that they intended to say no. And they were the decision maker. They were 100% able to tell you no. But they weren't able to tell you yes. So you do run into that situation from time to time. What that means is, if they tell you at the beginning that yes, they're the decision maker, and at the end they say they need to talk to somebody, that tells me that you have sold them. Doesn't matter that you sold them because they can't say yes, but you sold them because they were planning on saying no, and now they're at least willing to consider the possibility that yes is the right answer. And so that is a good thing. The second thing you need to do is setting them up is to make sure they understand that you're not there for a friendly chit chat. You're there to sell them something. At the end, you intend to present a product for them in exchange for money. I am amazed at how many publishers don't do that. And it's almost like they view the presentation as like a fact-finding mission, and the customer views the presentation the same way. You have to let them know, I'm here with the intention of leaving here with a signed agreement. And so you do that at the beginning, and you don't have to be a dick about it. Just simply say, hey, one of the reasons why I want to make sure that you're somebody that can say yes is because I intend to present the solution here at the end that I think will solve your marketing problems. Now, it's up to you to decide if it's the right fit or not, but I will tell you going in, I think it's the perfect tool for what you're looking for. Now, what did I just do? I told them I'm planning on selling them something. I established my belief in the product. I connected it to it's a solution for a problem they have. But more importantly, I empowered them because I ultimately made them know that I fully understand it's your decision. I want you to evaluate this knowing that I'm going to try to sell you this product. That's powerful. People like being reminded that they're ultimately in control, because otherwise they start to feel like you're pushing this and telling them what to do, and by empowering them, you move forward. So by doing those things at the beginning, now you've really laid the groundwork for closing the sale at the end. Now, next thing I want to talk about is this difference between the presentation and the close. Now, unfortunately, when you go to do a presentation with a client, the word presentation really kind of represents the whole experience. But that's really not fair. Because when you go meet with a client, there are two elements involved. There is the presentation, and then there is the close. And they have to be treated differently because they serve two very different purposes with the client. So I want to break down the difference first and foremost. So when we first talk about the presentation is all high energy. You have to be excited about what you're bringing to the table because they're going to feel that excitement. Energy is something that transfers. If you're excited about your product, by the end of the presentation, they should be excited about your product as well, and they will borrow some of that energy to get excited about it. It also needs to be informative. It is when you actually tell them about what you do. What is unique about your product? What is different about it? But more importantly, it also has to be focused on solving their problem. One of the biggest mistakes people make in their presentation is they make it all about their product. It is very important that you remember in every sales situation, the customer doesn't give a shit about your product. What they care about is, does your product solve a problem that they have? One of the things that I see over and over and over again in magazine presentations is the presentation does a great job of explaining to the client what the magazine does, but it assumes the client is going to connect the dots between what the magazine does and what they need it to do. And they don't. You have to make sure every step of the way of your presentation that you tell them what the magazine does, but then you also connect the dots to why that is important to them, because the customer won't make that connection. And you guys all go to high-end homeowners and you assume that the business owner is going to say, "Ooh, high-end homeowners." But they don't, because they don't make that connection that high-end homeowners are more profitable and better customers. And if they do make it, they only get about part way there, because in their mind, for a business owner who starts up a business, all they want is customers. All they want is volume. They want as many people buying their product, walking through their door as they can. And so for some of them, your presentation is the first time in their professional career they've actually been asked to think about the fact that some customers are better than others. And you have to make that connection for them. The close. The close is a different animal. The close is all about making them feel comfortable. So the first thing you have to realize is your energy must change. If you bring excitement and high energy to the close, you overwhelm them. You continue to make them just feel, you keep their adrenaline really high. What happens when our adrenaline is really high? We look at risk and we look for things to be afraid of. And if you go into the close and you're still at a ceiling high level of energy, you're going to increase their anxiousness, you're going to increase their fear, and you're going to make it less likely they will buy. So the energy in the close has to be empathetic. It has to be, I want to help. And that's hard for a lot of people. And so this transition, which we'll talk about in a second, requires you to make that adjustment from high energy to high empathy. And you have to do that, because in the close basically is all about finding a working solution that doesn't overwhelm them, but will still help solve their problem. But most importantly, it's about making them feel comfortable with saying yes, because that's what the close is all about. The close is about making them feel comfortable saying yes. Now, how do you transition from one to the other? Because that seems like an extreme jump to go from bouncing off the wall with excitement about your product and how you can help them to calming it down, pulling back on the reins, and focusing on making them feel comfortable. So there's two questions or two statements that you can make. One's a question and one's a statement that will shift gears and put you in the position for the close to work. The first one is at the end of the presentation. This is when you've got them, you've told them about the product, and you simply ask, if money wasn't an issue, would you want to be in the magazine? If money wasn't an issue, would you want to be in the magazine? Now, what does that do? That basically gives them a chance to process everything you've told them about the magazine and decide that if you gave it to them for free, would they take it? Most of the time, they're going to say yes. But it does a second thing as well. It allows you to figure out if there is any other reason that they won't buy other than the price. Because if they tell you, I would take it if it was free, which is basically what answering this question is yes, what does. Then you know that at the end, if they don't buy, it has to do with money. And your knowledge of that is an essential part of how you handle the close. So that's the first thing at the end of the presentation. Now, the next thing is, then this is where the energy shifts. And as I go through this, you're going to hear the energy shift. My job now is to find a campaign that will grow your business at a price you're comfortable with. You feel that energy change? You feel that calming mechanism that comes out that sets up the close? The word comfortable is one of the most powerful words you can ever use in sales. Because when someone tells you they want to make you comfortable, you can almost feel tension leaving your shoulders. The word comfortable makes you more comfortable. It just does. So now what have I done? With these two statements, I've wrapped up the presentation, the high energy stage. I've gotten them to say, yes, they would buy the product if it didn't cost anything. And now I say, my job now is to find a campaign that will grow your business at a price you are comfortable with. Okay, moving on to the mistakes that people make. Now, these are not in any particular order, because the reality of it is they all cost you in the same manner. And some of them you'll notice that, oh yeah, that's me. And others you'll say, well, I do a good job of that. And that's okay. But any one of these mistakes kills the sale. And all of these mistakes have to do with an awareness of what's taking place in the minds of that customer. Number one, and this one seems so silly. And I would love to sit here and say that I am sure none of you do this. But I've done hundreds of role-playing exercises with magazine publishers, and I would say for every 10 that I do, 7 make this mistake. And that is, they don't ask for the sale. They don't ask for the sale. Now, I'm sure immediately you were like, well, I asked for the sale, and you probably do, because 7 of them do, but 3 don't. Actually, I said that backwards. Three do, but 7 don't. Now, the real question is, are you not asking for the sale, but think you are? This is not asking for the sale. Well, what do you think? How many times have people do a presentation and get to the end, throw the options out there, and say, well, what do you think? That's not asking for the sale. That is asking for an extension of this conversation because I enjoy talking to you. Do you think this is something that could help your business? Is not asking for the sale. Once again, that is asking that we keep chatting instead of complete a process. Asking for the sale is, are you ready to move forward now? In some capacity. Are you ready to be a part of this community right now? Are you ready to start your campaign so we can begin strategizing for the maximum impact? Are you ready to be in this magazine today? Something that says they give you a yes or no answer, and if they say yes, you make the sale. And here's a basic simple rule for knowing whether or not you're asking for the sale. If I was to sit down with each of you one-on-one and say, what is your closing question? And you could immediately give me your answer, then you're probably asking for the sale. If you can't, you're not. Because closing question needs to be something you ask every time in the same way at the exact point that moves forward. My closing question is, are you ready to become my plumbing expert today so we can get started mapping out your articles? Because it was selling the expert contributor. Or are you ready to get moving today so we can go ahead and get your ad designed? And every single presentation ended that way. And if you don't have the answer to what is your closing question, then you're making this mistake. You're not asking for the sale. You're asking things that extend the conversation, but don't close the deal. So that's number one. Number two, they're not in order. Take that back. But the second one is too many options. Your closing question should have a yes or no answer. If you're asking for the sale and there are still multiple options on the table, the customer will not buy. Let me repeat that. If you're asking for the sale and there are still multiple options on the table, the customer will not buy. They will get more fixated on the secondary decisions instead of the primary decision, which is whether to purchase or not. It is human nature. Think about this for a second. If you went into a shoe store, you need to buy a pair of shoes, and you walked in a shoe store, and there was only one pair of shoes that fit you, how long does it take you to make your decision? Instantly. I'm either buying them or I'm not. I either like them or I don't. If there are 30 pairs of shoes that fit you, you're there for 3 hours and you still probably leave without a pair of shoes. Because you get so fixated on not picking one of the wrong 29 than you do about buying one. Same thing applies here. If you get to the end of the process and you go ask for the sale, and they're still trying to decide between an eighth page, quarter page, half page, third page, full page, 12, 34, 36 months, feature position, back cover, if all of those things are still on the table, or if any combination of them is still on the table, they will never buy. Because that's not how the human brain works. So your job, remember we said my job is to find the campaign that will help you grow your business at a price you're comfortable with. Your job is to filter that down to one option before you ask for the sale. Now, if you ask for the sale and they don't immediately say yes, then you know that's not the right option. And you go back to the drawing board and you make adjustments. And then you come back and you ask for the sale again. Once again, with one offer and one offer only on the table. And you repeat that process until you find one that they are comfortable saying yes to. And that's how sales happen. Next mistake, not being the expert. Not being the expert. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm going to share what I mean by that with a story that I think will drive home what I'm trying to say more than any words I can. Let's imagine that you walk into your kitchen and your sink, a pipe's burst in your sink, and water is running into the floor. Okay? Your kitchen's flooding because you've got a burst sink in your kitchen. And so you grab the phone, you call the plumber. And the plumber shows up at your house. He walks into the kitchen, looks down at the water, and says, your kitchen's flooding. What would you like me to do about it? And he looks at you and you're like, well, I want you to fix the sink. And he's like, okay, well, what type of pipe would you like me to use? What type of fitting should I use? What's the first thing I need to do to get started? Should I use copper or PVC? Do we need to replace and he starts asking you to explain to him what you want him to do to fix your sink. How much confidence are you going to have in that plumber? You, as the homeowner, don't understand plumbing. You don't understand which type of wrenches. You don't understand connections. You don't understand the adhesive they use. All you know is you've got a problem that you brought in an expert to fix. That's the situation you're in when you're sitting in front of a business person and you're presenting your magazine. You're the expert. You know what they need to do to help solve their particular marketing struggle. And yet, all too often, magazine publishers offer no guidance at all. They throw every option on the table as if they are all exactly equal, and they wait for the customer to tell them what type of pipe to use. Now, if I'm the homeowner and I bring in the plumber and he says, "Hey, I tell you what, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to get a PVC pipe. We're going to cut off the water. Then we're going to put this PVC pipe in running into the floor." And maybe I'm a fan of copper pipe. As the homeowner, I still have the final say, and I can say, "Mr. Plumber, I want to do the copper pipe." And he'll put the copper pipe in. But his job is to make recommendations and suggestions based on his expertise. It's not my job as the homeowner to sort through everything. And when you're a magazine publisher, you need to guide them based on your expertise. And here's the thing, you may not feel like an expert, but if the only marketing training you've ever gotten came from the magazine company, you're still worlds ahead of them in your marketing knowledge compared to what they know. So that sounds something like this. Well, I can tell you, I know right now in this community, you're not a very well-known name. So at the very least, we need to make sure that we do this. And I would suggest including this product here, which will help you get listed higher in services. And I would include a little bit over here because those things will work together to really get you recognized in this community. And that's first and foremost that we need to do. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take my suggestion, but at least I've established what I, the marketing expert, think they should do, because that's what they're expecting from someone selling them marketing options. Now, if they come back and say, well, obviously that's more than I can afford, then you come back and say, okay, well, I tell you what then, let's do this. I think of these options, this over here is the most important thing right now. So let's take these other parts off the table. Let's do this, and that will bring the price down to here. At this, are you ready to move forward and start this campaign? And once again, I'm allowing my expert to come through because they expect that. Just like the homeowner doesn't expect to tell the plumber how to fix the house. Next mistake, avoiding the money conversation. This one is a killer. They all are, but this one is the one that really comes into play often. What do I mean by the money conversation? Money conversation is, what are they comfortable spending? Now, no one likes talking about money. No one does. No one likes talking about money. If I was to walk up to any one of you and ask you to share your banking information for me so we could talk through your daily expenses, your reaction would not be okay. People don't like talking about money. They don't like talking about money with their spouses, let alone total strangers. And yet often we allow the customer to decide when we're going to talk about money. We got to talk about money before the sale can happen. Think about this for a second. And I'm going to ask you all the right question. Do you ever get ghosted by a client that you met with and you call them back when you say you're going to call them back and they don't answer? And you grumble and you decide that, oh, that means they're not interested or they're just a total ass and all that stuff. I'm going to explain to you why that happens. Because you don't have the money conversation at the end of your presentation. Think about this for a second. You get to the end, you ask for the sale, and they come back with, I need to think about it. Now, you know it's probably because they're not comfortable with that price. Now, that means in order for you to find out what they are comfortable with, you have to have this conversation about money. But instead of having it, you say, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll call you back tomorrow. Now, in your mind, what you're thinking is, if I call them back tomorrow and it turns out the half price is too expensive, I'll come back with the quarter price that's more affordable. Now, they don't want to have that conversation. So when you call the next day, they look down at their phone and they say, oh, it's Mike calling. If I answer that phone, I have to talk about money. I don't want to talk about money. I'm just not going to answer the phone. So you gave them control of when a conversation they don't want to have takes place. Now, they hope you just don't call back. But if you do call back often enough, eventually they're like, well, I got to answer the damn phone now. And so they come up with some total bullshit reason to avoid having the conversation. So when they do finally answer, their choice is, I can either make something up or I can have a conversation I don't want to have. So they answer and they say, well, I talked to my partner, or I talked to my third grade English teacher who retired 7 years ago, and she said it really wasn't a great idea. And it's all because they don't want to have that conversation. Now, here's a little tip to how to have it. Because you asked that question earlier, would you want to be in the magazine if money wasn't an issue? You just remind them of that. When they say, I need to think about it, you just say, hey, just a few minutes ago, you told me that if money wasn't an issue, you'd be in the magazine. Can I assume you're just not comfortable with that price? Guess what? They're going to say, yeah, that's a little more than I was wanting to spend. And guess what you now have? You have the money conversation. You initiated it in a very comfortable, friendly manner. So now you can move forward to finding what they are comfortable spending by simply reminding them that just moments ago they said they'd buy if it wasn't for money. Now they're not buying. Are you just not comfortable? And you have that conversation. And then finally, the last of the 5 is you freeze when they push back. Now, ironically, this is a mistake that happens in every step of the sales process. You're making your phone calls to get appointments. They say something you're not sure about. You freeze. You don't know what to do. You go to pick up the phone to make your calls and you don't make them because you're afraid of this moment. What if they say something I don't know how to answer and I freeze up? Sales is all about knowing what to say and how to say it when somebody pushes back. Now, a true understanding of what to do in these situations doesn't come from simply having a script memorized, because no 2 people are going to push back in the same way. Every time you get an objection, every time somebody pushes back, it's going to be a little different. And if you rely on, I say this when they say this, you're going to struggle. Being able to handle this comes from a true understanding of why they're saying the things they say, what those things they're saying really mean, because they don't always mean what they sound like they mean. Like, for example, I need to think about it very, very seldom means they need to think about it. What it really means is I'm not comfortable with that price, but I really like the product. I just need to figure out a way to make myself comfortable with that price. You can make it comfortable by having the money conversation and figure out what they are comfortable with. So understanding what it really means is difficult, because sometimes it means something totally different. I need to talk to my wife might mean they need to talk to their wife. Or it might mean they don't have the cojones to tell you no and want to throw somebody under the bus. But you don't know if you freeze up. So learning not to freeze in all of those situations helps close more sales. And in addition to that, knowing you are prepared not to freeze, no matter what someone says, also instills a level of confidence in your ability that makes everything else you do better and more effective. So understanding. Which brings us to the final part, and that I'll mention real quickly, is I do have a 15-part course which now outlines and puts you in a position to be able to handle any of those situations. And what we do in this course is we first help you understand, the power of your magazine. This is not for generic. This is for local publishers. Understanding the power of your magazine in great detail in terms of what you're capable of doing with it. Second, I teach you business principles that help you understand how marketing can be used to help businesses in ways that no one ever thinks about. Most of you have always been taught that people advertise to get more leads. That's shit. Yes, for some people, getting more leads is the answer to their question. For most of the businesses you meet with, that is not what they need your campaign to do. They need your campaign to do one of several other things that will increase their profit. If you really want to talk about a return on investment, then you need to understand how marketing returns on that investment. I'll give you an example of what I mean and the type of things that are covered in this course. I had a guy once, I was meeting with a guy that owned an auto shop, an incredible businessman that was running an incredible business. He was doing everything right, which is something you can't say often about a business owner. And so at the end, I just asked him simply, I was like, well, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about? What is your biggest fear? And he said his biggest fear was that his technician would leave. I think the guy's name was Fred. He's like, I'm terrified that Fred is going to leave. I'm in a small town. I can't pay him what they can pay him in a big city. And if Fred ever leaves, I'm screwed. He's the only guy who can use the analysis equipment and can diagnose a lot of problems with cars. And it would cost me approximately $200,000 to bring somebody new in and get them trained and get them to where Fred is. Not to mention the business I would lose in that process. And I said, well, let's make sure Fred doesn't leave. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, here's the deal. Since you can't pay Fred enough to keep him, if money's the issue, let's give him a reason to stay. Let's build an ad campaign in my magazine that celebrates Fred. Every month, I want you to show a picture of Fred and his family in your ad so that everywhere he goes, people will start to say, hey, I saw you in the magazine. And guess what? Fred can't get that if he goes to work at one of those big auto shops in a big city. That is something you can provide him that they can't. I can't guarantee he won't leave, but isn't it worth $700 a month to significantly decrease the chances that you're going to have to spend $200,000 to replace him? Those are the things that you can do in your magazine to help that business that has not a thing to do with getting more leads. And once you have that level of understanding of advertising, marketing, plus the language and the tools to use to help business owners understand that, you're going to be ready to take on any situations and you're going to see significant growth. So those are the things you're going to learn. You're going to learn what's happening when the customers push back, and you're going to stop selling customers and start selling profit. And that is essential because once you respond clearly and confidently with no hesitation, you're going to close a lot more deals. And here's where it all starts. Simple as that. You can go to the jpbusinessacademy.com, mastering objections to the course. It's $500, which one sale for any of you recoups that. It does come with a money back guarantee if you take the entire course and you clearly have tried to implement the things I talked about and have no success. We'll go back. We have ongoing objection support where I will do, if anybody has an objection that they can't figure out how to apply the framework I teach to that objection, then they send me a message and I will either do a special webinar handling that objection specifically, or we'll call and do a one-on-one call, and you have lifetime access to it. So that is essential. In addition to that, if you would like to just kind of figure out if there's something that more personally addresses your struggles, reach out to me. We'll schedule a time to just sit down and go through what you do and figure out what you need in order to get you to where you want to be.